In the shadow of the Challenger disaster, there lies a forgotten moment in NASA's history, an event so dangerous, so narrowly avoided, that it should have become a defining story of space exploration. But it didn't. It was never televised. It never made front-page news. In fact, most people, even avid space enthusiasts, have never heard about it. This is the story of STS-27, the classified space shuttle mission that nearly ended in catastrophe and the agency's quiet scramble to bury it. The year was 1988. NASA was just beginning to emerge from the devastating aftermath of the Challenger explosion, which had killed 7 astronauts and grounded the entire shuttle fleet for nearly 3 years. Public trust was shattered. Every mission going forward would be under intense scrutiny. But behind the scenes, the US government had other priorities, especially the Department of Defense. America's Cold War against the Soviet Union had quietly extended into orbit, and the military needed its own shuttle missions to deploy reconnaissance satellites and other secret payloads. That's where STS-27 came in. Atlantis launched on December 2, 1988, under heavy secrecy. Officially, the mission carried a Department of Defense payload. Unofficially, it was a billion-dollar spy satellite, likely a Lacrosse radar imaging satellite designed to track Soviet troop movements and missile deployments. The crew was composed of 5 astronauts, including mission commander Robert "Hoot" Gibson, pilot Guy Gardner, and mission specialists Jerry Ross, William Shepard, and Richard Mullane. Most of them were seasoned military veterans, disciplined, resilient, and trained to operate in absolute secrecy. Shortly after liftoff, the trouble began. Just 85 seconds into the flight, a piece of insulation from the solid rocket booster broke off and slammed into Atlantis's underbelly. The astronauts heard the impact, but couldn't see the damage. In the vacuum of space, it's hard to inspect your own ship, especially the heat-resistant tiles that protect the orbiter from burning up on re-entry. This wasn't just any minor ding. The space shuttle's thermal protection system is made up of more than 24,000 individual tiles, each one meticulously designed to absorb heat on re-entry. During descent, the shuttle's skin reaches temperatures of over 3,000 degrees. If even a small area is compromised, it can lead to catastrophic failure. This was the very issue that doomed Columbia 15 years later. Mission Control in Houston suspected something was wrong. The crew had trouble with communication systems early in the mission. When video of the orbiter's underside was transmitted back to Earth, the military's encryption caused a delay. By the time NASA engineers were able to view the images, they were horrified. Dozens of heat-resistant tiles appeared to be missing or damaged. Some engineers argued that the shuttle should remain in orbit longer, perhaps attempt an alternate re-entry angle, or even consider an emergency rescue scenario. But the classified nature of the mission complicated everything. Few at NASA were even allowed to view the shuttle's condition. The payload was too sensitive. The astronauts were told to prepare for re-entry on schedule 5 days after launch. As the shuttle began its fiery descent through the atmosphere, everyone in mission control held their breath. Robert Gibson and his crew were fully aware of the stakes. They had been informed vaguely that there might be an issue with the orbiter's heat shield. But in the cockpit, they saw no fire, no alarms, just the roar of re-entry plasma licking at the fuselage. Somehow, Atlantis made it back to Earth. The shuttle touched down safely at Edwards Air Force Base in California. The crew survived. But when ground engineers finally inspected the vehicle, they were stunned. The underside of Atlantis was charred, pockmarked, and damaged more severely than any shuttle in history. Over 700 heat tiles had been damaged. One tile, located just inches from the orbiter's aluminum structure, was missing entirely. Miraculously, a dense carbon panel beneath it had absorbed enough heat to prevent structural failure. If that panel had not been there, the shuttle would have likely disintegrated, just as Columbia did in 2003. The incident was never fully publicized. Because the mission was classified, no photos of the damage were released to the public for years. NASA filed an internal report marked with limited distribution. It acknowledged the severity of the incident, but stopped short of calling it a near disaster. The astronauts were later briefed on how close they had come to death, but were told not to speak openly about it. It wasn't until years later, through declassified documents and post-retirement interviews, that the truth began to emerge. In his memoir, astronaut Richard Mullane described how he felt like he had dodged a bullet. Robert Gibson later said, "We knew there was damage, but not that it was that bad. I'm just glad we didn't know the full extent until after we landed." So why wasn't this a national story? Why didn't Atlantis become a symbol of resilience or caution, like Apollo 13 or Columbia? The answer lies in politics and secrecy. The Reagan administration was heavily invested in space militarization. Programs like Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars, needed the shuttle to succeed as a defense platform. Admitting that a DoD mission had nearly ended in disaster would have undermined that narrative. It would have also raised questions about whether NASA was being pushed too hard, too fast for military goals. And so STS-27 became a ghost mission, remembered by a few engineers and enthusiasts, but invisible to the wider public. Yet its legacy is profound. It exposed the vulnerability of the shuttle's tile system, prompted quiet design reviews, and reinforced the need for better in-orbit inspection tools. Sadly, many of those lessons were not fully implemented. When Columbia broke apart over Texas in 2003, the same chain of events unfolded. Insulation damage, a blind spot on the orbiter's underside, and a crew unaware of their impending doom. STS-27 was the warning shot, the call that came before the tragedy, and it was missed. In hindsight, Atlantis' survival was a miracle, a one-in-a-million alignment of hardware, trajectory, and heat dispersion. The fact that 5 astronauts survived that mission is a testament to the strength of NASA's engineering and a sobering reminder of how fragile spaceflight really is. Today, you can find pieces of STS-27's legacy buried in obscure technical papers, in passing comments during astronaut Q&As, or in the quiet humility of those who were there. It remains one of the most dangerous space flights in American history, not because it failed, but because it almost did, and no one noticed. This is not just a forgotten story. It's a forgotten warning, a chapter of history that shows us how close we've come to disaster, and how easy it is for those moments to vanish beneath the surface of public memory. This is the lost history of STS-27, the shuttle mission that almost didn't make it home.